Before you watch this video, I want to ask you something. What if I told you there was a small child, frightened, alone, with no one to tell him, it's going to be okay? That child grew up, but whatever had broken inside him never healed. Now let me tell you who that child was. Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, Richard Ramirez, for names that have become synonymous with nightmares, for men who, together, destroyed hundreds of lives. But today, I'm not here to talk about the crimes. I want to talk about before, about the moment a small wound became an endless darkness, because psychologists say something that most people don't want to hear. No one is born a monster. So the question is, where did it begin? When no one taught you love, you learned to make them stay. Jeffrey Dahmer was 4 years old when he had a routine medical procedure, a double hernia surgery, medically unremarkable. But what followed was not routine at all. The cheerful, curious child who went into that operating room did not come back the same way. His father Lionel later described a son who, after that surgery, seemed to retreat somewhere deep inside himself, somewhere difficult to reach. He became withdrawn, detached. He developed an unusual fascination with animal remains, collecting them, studying them, in ways his parents failed to recognize as warning signs. His father even encouraged it, assuming his son simply had a scientific mind. Then the household fell apart. His parents fought constantly. His mother struggled with her mental health. Emotional neglect became the atmosphere he breathed. And in his teenage years, his mother left him alone for extended periods. No money, no food, no one. Psychologists call this fear of abandonment. When a child's mind learns that people leave, that attachment leads to loss. That love is something you can't hold on to. Dahmer carried that fear into adulthood, until he found a deeply disturbed solution. If you love someone, don't let them go. That became the psychological logic behind everything that followed. Not pure aggression, pathological attachment. When your identity is built on a lie, you build a mask. Ted Bundy came into this world through a lie. His mother, a young, unmarried woman, gave birth to him at a home for unwed mothers, to escape the social shame of illegitimacy. His grandparents raised him as their own son. His biological mother was introduced to him as his older sister. And no one corrected that lie. But there's something else that rarely gets mentioned. His grandfather, the man who raised him, was, according to his own family members, a deeply violent man. He was abusive to his children. He harmed animals in the neighborhood. He was a figure of cruelty, not safety. This was the world Ted Bundy grew up in. No real identity. No father. A foundation built entirely on deception. He was intelligent, charismatic. He excelled academically. But beneath all of that capability was a person who genuinely didn't know who he was. Psychologists believe his rage toward women was rooted precisely here. Fury at the mother who abandoned him, and at the girlfriend in college who eventually left him, triggering something that had been dormant for years. Bundy understood one thing early. If you show people who you really are, they reject you. So he built a mask. And the mask was so convincing that almost everyone was deceived. He was a law student, charming, likable. Forensic psychiatrists identified extreme grandiosity and a complete absence of remorse as the core features of his psychological profile, the intersection of narcissism and psychopathy. Bundy didn't just commit crimes, he controlled, because control was the only thing that guaranteed no one could ever leave again. You didn't come this far to stop here. Subscribe and go deeper with Obscura Mind. When you have to be someone else, you become two people. Most people know John Wayne Gacy as the killer clown. But before the clown, there was a small boy. His father, John Stanley Gacy, was an alcoholic who named his son after John Wayne, the Hollywood icon of American masculinity. But in that father's eyes, His son never came close to that image. He was overweight, unathletic, close to his mother, and for that his father called him names. Sissy, mama's boy. The humiliations happened often, frequently in the basement, while young John tried and failed to help his father with household projects. One of Gacy's earliest memories was being struck by his father at age 4 for accidentally knocking over engine parts. And then at age 8, a family friend, a man trusted by his father, began to violate the boundaries of that trust. When young Gacy told his father did not believe him. In that moment, something fractured inside Gacy. The father who was supposed to protect him was the same person causing him the most harm. Dr. Rappaport, the forensic psychiatrist on the case, spent 65 hours in conversation with Gacy. His conclusion was precise. The dynamic between Gacy and his father was the same dynamic he recreated with his victims. His crimes were a psychological reenactment of the trauma of his childhood. Gacy lived 2 parallel lives: a successful businessman, community volunteer, a clown costume and a smile at neighborhood events. And beneath his house, 33 victims. He was 2 people. Because from childhood, he had learned one thing: if you show who you really are, you get hurt. When someone teaches you how to be a monster, you become one. Richard Ramirez's story is different from the others. The others carried wounds that were hidden. Ramirez had his wound shown to him. Deliberately. His father was an angry, abusive man, the youngest of 5 children in an immigrant family from El Paso, Texas. But there was another influence that changed the direction of everything. His older cousin Miguel, known as Mike, was a Vietnam War veteran. Miguel would tell his young cousin stories of what he had done during the war. He shared photographs, graphic documentation of the acts he described. Ramirez was 12 years old when he saw those images. His cousin told him, "Having power over life and death is a rush. It's godlike. You decide who lives and who dies." 1 year later, at 13, Ramirez witnessed Miguel fatally shoot his own wife during a domestic confrontation. A 13-year-old mind witnesses that and does not simply move on. Ramirez later identified with Satanism, not necessarily from deep theological conviction, but because it gave him a framework for the darkness that had taken root inside him, a language that told him destruction has meaning. 1 wound, 4 paths, 1 outcome. Let's take a step back. For different people, for different families, for different cities, for different crimes, but one thing in common: each of them in childhood had a fundamental need that was never met. Dahmer, the need for connection. Bundy, the need for identity. Gacy, the need for safety. Ramirez, the need for meaning. John Bowlby, the British psychiatrist, developed a theory that has held up for decades. When the bond between a child and their caregiver is severed, social, emotional, and intellectual development suffers. The result, in the most severe cases, is what he called affectionless psychopathy, an inability to empathize or to form meaningful relationships with others. A wound alone does not create a killer, but a mind without tools, without support, without a single person who says, "I see you," may construct its own solution, and sometimes that solution is the darkest thing a human being can imagine. I am not here to justify any of this, not for a single moment. But I want to ask something of you. The next time you see a child who is crying, who is reaching out to be seen, who needs someone to say, "I see you," remember, each of these 4 men was once that child. Darkness does not begin from nothing. It begins in a moment where there wasn't enough light, and light is always a choice. Reality is never the full story. Obscura.